We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is 7 a.m., January 25th, and it's a Tuesday. Just been off today. Cooked some quesadilla for dinner, did some dishes, had a therapy appointment. That went pretty good. Ended up talking about God and Voltaire. That was kind of random. I've never actually read Voltaire, but there's a phrase that she sent me off with that I kind of liked was, what is a watch without a watchmaker? I don't know. Kind of like that. Talking about God in general. Yeah, that's about it for an update. Let's get on with the show. So as you guys know, I like to cover these mock tabletop exercises, especially considering everything that's going on right now. Find it kind of fishy. So this is one I haven't covered yet, called Clade X. Mock Clade X pandemic disseminates human population denotes global pre-planning needs. The lack of both a protective V-word and a proactive worldwide plan for tackling the spread of a catastrophic global pandemic resulted in the death of 150 million across Earth during the recent Clade X simulation exercise hosted by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And minus any pre-pandemic policy, solutions or an effective V-word in the pipeline to counteract the ongoing spread of the fabricated Clade X, identified as a novel strain of the human parainfluenza. I'm not sure what that is. With genetic elements of Nipah virus, the fabricated death toll was expected to rise to 900 million deaths worldwide and 30 million to 40 million deaths in the United States, said Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Center for Health Security, who acted as host during the day-long Clade X event held May 15th in Washington, D.C. The Clade X simulation was held to illustrate the possible consequences of a pandemic, the challenges posed in consideration of policy solutions towards improving outcomes, Cicero said in starting the event, which she called a fictional but well-researched scenario based on epidemiologic modeling, public health principles, and an assessment of past outbreaks. Quote, "We aren't asserting that the scenario in Clade X is the most likely to occur," she said, "but we are asserting that we are simulating an event that is possible." Cicero encouraged the participants and the audience on site and online to look at the big picture and policy implications for health security rather than the center's assumptions being presented during the live-streamed exercise. Quote, "Health security issues are nonpartisan issues," she said, and this exercise is explicitly nonpartisan. The Clade X event featured 10 players, former high-ranking U.S. government officials, and a current United States Congresswoman prominent in the fields of national security or epidemic response, who portrayed members of the executive community, also known as XCOM. As a team of advisors to the president, they engaged in 4 fake National Security Council, NSC for short, meetings to resolve real-world policy issues upon learning a pandemic had struck. Cicero pointed out that XCOM members were not meant to represent the current or any former administration, and they used their past experiences and previous high-level federal positions as well as their best judgment in addressing significant uncertainties in current prevention and response capabilities, hamstrung by policy challenges at the federal level. The scenario opened with the present-day outbreak of a new serious respiratory disease. Sound familiar? In Germany and Venezuela. In the weeks that followed, a radical group focused on reducing the human population claimed responsibility for the creation and intentional release of Clade X. Sounds familiar again, sounds kind of like Wuhan. Claims that later were verified by government and international bodies, including the World Health Organization. There's no V word for Clade X, and pressure on the players to help the president find solution intensifies as cases continue to appear in the United States, first at a Massachusetts university and then near the nation's capital, among other locations. Clade X quickly caused widespread worldwide angst as the numbers of severe cases and deaths mounted. So this reminds me definitely of the Operation... I just did an episode on it. I mean, it's like Agenda 21. It's like Operation Dark Winter. There's another one. Crimson Contagion. This reminds me specifically of that one for some reason. Within a year, 150 million people died, 15 million of them in the United States, where a constitutional crisis unfolded. Both the president and the vice president fell ill, leaving the Speaker of the House as acting president, and 1/3 of the members serving in Congress died following the failure of the first V word introduced during the tabletop exercise. Now we get into finding solutions. Finding solutions. During each of the 4 XCOM meetings, the players work to solve evolving policy changes as the crisis escalates. Their dialogue and efforts were unscripted and demonstrated how challenging the situation would be to handle. For instance, during the first meeting, Dr. Tom Inglesby, director of the Center for Health Security, who plays the White House National Security Advisor, relayed that the president wanted to know what XCOM members think should be done to help Venezuela. In setting up the situation, fake news clips from the pretend GNN, just like CNN, love it, it's in your fucking face, people, come on now. GNN network would inform XCOM members, followed by administration updates from Eric Toner, a senior associate with the center who played NSA's senior director of global health security. GNN reporters said Caracas had fallen into chaos. I don't even know what that country is. Caracas? I've never heard of Caracas. The city had no isolation capabilities. So many people were turned away at already overloaded hospitals unless they had Clade X. According to GNN's special report, Venezuela had publicly rejected medical help from America, but medical personnel from Cuba, Russia, and Iran were allowed into the country. Quote, "Only massive international intervention will help solve the crisis," an anonymous source told GNN. Toner said one option the administration had developed for XCOM consideration included sending 6 U.S. Departments of Defense DoD teams for short and 2 hospital teams to provide unprecedented help. Another center senior associate, Amesh Adalja, playing an infectious disease expert at the Centers for CDC, reported to XCOM members that Clade X had an uncertain origin, no known antiviral drugs would be helpful in treating it, none were in development or known to be effective, and it would take more than a year to develop and test for a V word. Should we deploy such significant DoD help? Asked Inglesby. I would support it, said John Billinger, former legal advisor to the U.S. State Department, who played the head role of U.S. Secretary of State. Quote, we need to lead internationally. Venezuela isn't North Korea, with which we have tense relations, and it will accept our support. But if the United States were to deploy federal help to Venezuela, when the U.S. also needed to consider if it would be able to provide American personnel with adequate protection, said former CIA General Counsel Jeff Smith, who played the director of the CIA. Jeff Smith, ew, CIA, gross. U.S. Representative Susan Brooks, Republican, Indiana, the only player to act out what she would do in her current position as a federal lawmaker, echoed the concern. Quote, we have little to no relationship with this country, Representative Brooks said. We have no idea how long doctors would be there, and they could bring the virus back here. If China and Russia are there to help contain it, then let them, and we will focus on Germany. Huh. Sounds familiar. Yes, we do want to coordinate with other countries, said former U.S. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Margaret Hamburg, who played the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. Quote, but we don't have to do it all ourselves. Former U.S. Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, D-A-S-C-H-L-E, Daschle, who played his previously held leadership position, suggested it might be better to send, quote, a small team to see what's exactly happening on the ground there first. On the contrary, said Bellinger, it's a failed state overall, quote, so in our national security interest, we need to cut it off now. Roughly an hour into the first XCOM meeting, former Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Tara O'Toole, who also acted in her previous position, threw in a twist. Quote, we just got word that the Coast Guard has intercepted boats carrying people from Venezuela to Puerto Rico who are seeking refugee status based on the epidemic, O'Toole said. The Coast Guard has requested more resources for more ships to intercept these boats. O'Toole said that the United States wasn't equipped to offer such a significant medical care on the ground in Venezuela, and suggested that the administration instead offer management capabilities and advice. Representative Brooks asked her fellow XCOM members in Puerto Rico was able to handle an influx of people coming in from Venezuela, and whether members of the Coast Guard were protected as they intercepted the boats with fleeing refugees. Quote, I'm concerned about protecting our people in the Coast Guard and in Puerto Rico, especially considering what Puerto Rico has already been through, she said, referring to the ongoing work there to overcome devastation wrought on the American territory by back-to-back hurricanes in 2017. First XCOM meeting ended with a GNN special report from an anonymous source who said it was unclear if the virus had escaped or was occurring naturally. Sounds familiar, Wuhan lab. And neither WHO nor the CDC could confirm whether it was a bioweapon. Yeah, you think? The subsequent 3 XCOM meetings that followed put the players in an increasingly tense situations that resulted in similarly stressful policy discussions, and by the end of Clade X, another V-word, the Mach Omega V-word, supposedly goes into production with a third of the world's population expecting to have access to it within 6 to 8 months. Man, it's like, I don't know, it's almost like they planned this shit. Once 80% of the remaining population received the V, then Clade X would be under control, according to an infectious disease expert during the simulated exercise. If a V had been developed earlier, maybe more lives could have been saved, he surmised in a mock TV report. And that's the final word. Final word. At the conclusion of the exercise, Cicero presented the Center for Health Security's 6 strategic policy goals that would need commitment from the United States to prevent or reduce the worst possible outcomes in future pandemics. The recommendations are 2. 1. Develop capability to produce new V-words and drugs for novel pathogens within months, not years. 2. Pioneer. So there you go. There's your rush on 1. Rushing to get an experimental V-word in everyone's arms. And they said earlier in this document that it was like 80% they wanted. I mean, craziness. Rush. Let's get this done. Let's get those needles in arms. Number 2, pioneer a strong and sustainable global health security system. 3, build a robust, highly capable national public health system that can manage the challenges of pandemic response. 4, develop a national plan to effectively harness all U.S. healthcare assets in a catastrophic pandemic. 5. Implement an international security for addressing research that increases pandemic risk. 6. Ensure the national security community is well prepared to prevent, detect, and respond to infectious disease emergencies. So that would get into like tracking the cell phones and all that crazy nonsense to make sure you're not spreading it. Going forward, the Center's Clade X project team plans to synthesize the most important points from the exercise and disseminate the findings among members of the U.S. and international biosecurity policy communities, Cicero said. The Center will translate these goals into policy recommendations, she added. So I don't know. Crazy. That's Clade X for you. We got some more time, so we'll put a couple crazy news stories in there at the end. But this was the gist of it all. This was the main episode. I hope you enjoy and stay tuned. So since we got some extra time, I figured I'd share some crazy news stories. Lab-made mini brains grow their own set of eyes. Scientists recently grew mini brains with their own set of eyes, according to new study. Organoids are miniature versions of organs that scientists can grow in the lab from stem cells, or cells that can mature into any type of cell in the body. Previously, scientists have developed tiny beating hearts and tear ducts that could cry like humans do. Scientists have even grown mini brains that produce brain-like waves like those of preterm babies. Now a group of scientists has grown mini brains that have something their real counterparts do not. A set of eye-like structures called optic cups that give rise to the retina, the tissue that sits in the back of the eye that contain light-sensing cells, according to the statement. In the human body, the retina sends signals to brain to the brain via the optic nerve, allowing us to see images. Quote, in the mammalian brain, nerve fibers of retinal ganglion cells reach out to connect with their brain targets, an aspect that has never before been shown in an in vitro system. Senior author I'm not going to pronounce his last name, a researcher at University Dusseldorf, said in a statement, ganglion cells are neurons located in the inner surface of the retina that communicate directly to the brain. Previously, researchers had grown optic cups individually in labs, but this is the first study that integrated optic cups into brain organoids, according to the statement. Blank and his team adapted a technique they previously developed for turning stem cells into neural tissue in order to create the mini brains with optic cups. Once the stem cell had developed into mini brains, the organoids form optic cups. The optic cups appeared as early as 30 days and matured within 50 days, a time frame similar to how the retina develops in a human embryo, according to the statement. And I'm going to leave an image on YouTube so you can see these brains growing eyeballs, essentially. It's crazy. It reminds me of that dude from Ninja Turtles. What was the villain? Crane or something like that? Crawl? I don't know. He was like a brain inside of some big body's stomach. In total, the researchers created 314 mini brains, and 72% of them formed optic cups. The organoids contained different types of retinal cells that formed active neuron networks that responded to light, according to the statement. The organoids also formed lens and corneal tissue. Quote, our work highlights the remarkable ability of brain organoids to generate primitive sensory structures that are light sensitive and harbor cell types similar to those found in the body. Why are scientists growing mini brains like these in a lab? These organoids can be useful for studying human brain development and related diseases. Scientists could use the new organoids with their optic cups to study brain-eye interactions during embryo development. What's more, they can be used to study retinal disorders and maybe even be used to create personalized retinal cell types for their therapies. The researchers now hope to figure out how to keep the optic cups viable for a long time and use them to research mechanisms behind retinal disorders. The findings were published August 17th in the journal Cell Stem Cell. So, yeah, they're creating miniature brains to study the retina. I don't know. I found it interesting. We had a little bit of extra time, so I figured I'd show you all that. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to put a face to a voice, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. It's Conspiracy Corner Podcast. The profile picture is a bunny rabbit with a samurai sword. If you want to listen to us on audio only, because it saves your phone battery, say you're working or working around the house, whatever, you can listen to us audio only on Breaker, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Anchor. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you all have an awesome.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes. or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.